Confluence and our launch event, Reimagining Urban Waterscapes. I will just take 2 minutes to set this up for our Facebook Live. So in case y'all are having issues joining the Zoom event, y'all can also join us on our Facebook pages on the Living Waters Museum and the Mumbai Water Narratives page. Oops. One second. On Facebook. So a little bit of technical issues.
Is there someone else who can do that?
No, it just takes a little time because we are going live on two simultaneous pages.
Okay.
So it'll just take 2 minutes.
Anyway, we're still admitting people in, so.
Yeah. Yes. So I believe
yeah,
we are live
on Facebook. Yeah.
On Facebook.
Let's start, Sukrit.
Just a moment. Yes. So hello again for people who entered after I said my first good evening for the day. And we really welcome you all to our first day launch event for Confluence Reimagining Urban Waterscapes. And my name is Sukrit. I'm the Art and Outreach Coordinator for Living Waters Museum. And before we start, I would like to present a small song. It's actually a culmination of two songs. The first one has been written by Mr. Ron Simpson as a theme song for World Water Day in the year 2011, and theme being water for cities. And the second one, which is very, very apt for the reason why we all are here, is written by Mr. Abhijit Joshi and was written to raise awareness for the rivers of Mumbai. So without further ado, I would like to start off with a small hymn. Where do we need when the land is dry? Where do we go when the sun is high? Many will answer, water is for life. Water for you and water for me. Water for animals and water for trees. Water for everyone in society. We are working together to keep our waters clean, treating water as a treasure in our urban community. The careful use of this resource is now on you and me, conserving water for a happier city. कैसे रुके वो जो बहती जाए, जाना कहाँ कुछ वो कह न पाए, कभी की राजी वो झिलमिलाती, कभी हवा जैसे गुनगुनाती, ये चार नदियाँ अभी मुंबई की शान थी, किस जमाने में ये शहर की जान थी, ये हौसलों से भरी, बंदियों से भरी, इसके किनारों में बसी अपनों की सारी खुशी, जो कुछ भी इसने दिया वो सब अनमोल है, ये इसको बचाना अभी हम सबका लक्ष्य है, चल चल मुंबई संग चल, कहता नदियों का जल, हम आज अगर मिल जाए तो बेहतर होगा कल, चल चल मुंबई संग चल, कहता नदियों का जल, हम आज अगर मिल जाए तो बेहतर होगा कल, चल चल मुंबई संग चल, कहता नदियों का जल, हम आज घर मिल जाए तो बेहतर होगा कल. Thank you. And as the last words say, चल चल मुंबई संग चल, कहता नदियों का जल, हम आज अगर मिल जाए तो बेहतर होगा कल, which if I may translate is, come on Mumbai, let's go. If together we consolidate each other's, along with each other's, we can definitely make tomorrow a better day. And I guess this is what we are here today with Mumbai Water Narratives. And off to you, Sarah. The screen is all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sukrit, and welcome everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I know there are many friends from all over the world who've joined in, so thank you so much. From the shores of the Arabian Sea, 7 islands strung together by reclaimed land, from rivers choking with urban waste to high-rise apartments dependent on the tanker economy, from informal communities struggling with a daily water crisis to the indigenous Warli and Koli communities struggling for their survival. Confluence captures Mumbai's intimate relationship with water. From the sound of waves crashing along our waterfronts to the pungent whiffs of Bombay duck drying on our streets, from the fading bishtis to the oft forgotten marine life along our shores, from ancient public tanks and fountains to the celebration of faith and the worship of a tap in an informal settlement winning their right to water. Confluence tells many a story of our rich water heritage, livelihoods, and cultural practices. In a year marked by a global pandemic where hand washing was a significant part of the preventive messaging for COVID-19, some 50 professionals, conservation architects, urban planners, artists, photographers, students, designers, researchers, developers, came together to document Mumbai's water journey, through storytelling, data visualization, and the visual arts. As we celebrate World Water Day tomorrow, the focus on valuing water reminds us of the need to re-examine societal and environmental paradigms that contribute to the promotion of water for peace and development. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated the importance of clean and adequate water in building resilient and healthy communities. The result of collaboration beyond institutional or disciplinary boundaries, Confluence demonstrates the importance of understanding water from a transdisciplinary lens that can bridge science, humanities, and the arts. Our goal is to communicate this water heritage to our youth as future water keepers and custodians. And we hope that Confluence inspires you to use water wisely and to listen to what our waters have to say. Confluence is supported by the Living Waters Museum, a virtual repository on India's water heritage, currently based at the Indian Institute for Science, Education and Research in Pune, and a member of the Global Network of Water Museums, which you will hear more about shortly. As the lead curator and as the founder of Living Waters Museum, I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank everyone who has made this exhibition possible, from our core partners to our contributors and our incredible design and development team. Most of all, we owe a debt of gratitude to one person, to Ipshita, for holding all the pieces together over the past 6 months with endurance, commitment, and passion. And it will be Ipshita's honor to take you through Confluence after the end of the panel. So without much further ado, our panel today explores the role of interdisciplinary education, not just in classrooms, but beyond, through water museums and local communities. How can we understand our complex urban waterscapes to build more just, equitable, and sustainable water futures? So we have 4 speakers who are friends in some form or the other. And it is my duty now to introduce our first speaker. Professor Dr. Eddy Moors is the rector of the UNESCO Institute for Water Education in Delft. He also holds the position of Professor Water and Climate at VU University Amsterdam. And Moores started his work at the World Meteorological Organization in Africa and the Caribbean. Amongst many positions that he holds, Eddy is also the president of the Global Network of Water Museums and associate editor of Environmental Science and Policy. And he has, the great thing is that Eddy has also been and traveled in India and South Asia for his research for many, many years. So Eddy, the floor is yours. I think each panelist has about 10 minutes. We will let all the panelists speak, and then we will open up for a few questions before we go into the launch of the site. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And I would like to first congratulate you, but the whole team actually of the Living Water Museum, and also for the exhibition, but also for all the other work that you're doing. And I would like to thank Sukrit for a very nice song. I think I really appreciated not only your singing, but also the lyrics of the song. I think they're quite appropriate for this event. And like Sarah said, I've been in India and also in Mumbai a number of times, and I really appreciate also that you're doing this, because I do think that that's something that is for the good of Mumbai as well. And with that, I will try to start up sharing my screen, because I would like to show you a few slides actually, and those are related to the Water Museum. And let me just...
You can press on the slideshow.
Yeah. I hope you see the slides now in full view.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
So this is a full slide. What I just wanted to do is to actually ask your attention on the bottom corner, actually there, because that's the announcement of another event that will take place from the Global Water Museum Network tomorrow in World Water Day. World Water Day is about valuing of water, and that's also why I appreciate both events that are there. There are numerous events all over the world on World Water Day, so I do hope that you take the opportunity actually to visit some of them, and maybe we see one another tomorrow again at one of those events. What I titled my presentation was Water Museums and Perception Sharing, because I do think that that's one of the strengths of water museum. And I will come back to that in a second, but I also would like to explain you a little bit what the Water Museum Network is. First of all, it's not just about classic musea, and that's also what I think you're experiencing today with the Living Water Museum. It's also not a classical museum, although there are also classical museums in there. It's broader than that. The Water Museum Global Network was started actually in 2018 as one of the flagships of UNESCO to see how we could improve and help also to create awareness, new thinking about how to overcome, among others, climate change. But of course, there are all other sorts of changes that are happening as well. This is, I think, a nice picture that also entitles and gives a little bit of a view on what we would like to achieve as a Global Water Museum Network. Is we would like to create new emotional bonds with water. And I think that's why I appreciated the song very much. I think music and singing is a very nice way of creating a different emotional bonds with water. And I think we need that. And another important part for the Water Museum Network is about how to engage, to create awareness, but also how to educate. And I think that musea, and especially water musea, they have a very, very rich arsenal, I should call it, in ways how they can engage with a broad public. And that can go from very young children to their parents, their grandparents, but also other people that are there. And there again, I think it's nice that we start with this also exhibition today, because I do think that at the moment, probably a lot of people that are watching are concerned with water, but I think an exhibition like this will also attract people that are not that well aware about water, and that I hope will become aware what water is about and why we think it's so important. And I hope that they will start thinking also that it is important. And I think that's also about the value of water. Then I think that Water Musea can also propose new values of water that may there and share new insights. And those insights may come from research. I think that the connection between the Water Musea and the research community is something that we can strengthen, but I do think that it's a nice and important one. I think Sarah is an example of how to combine those two. I think there are some other very nice examples. And I also think that it may help to think about water. What I really appreciate that's also happening in India is one way to look at maybe the rights of water. So can water, or can a water body, or can a catchment have its own rights? And I think maybe you don't necessarily have to implement that, but at least thinking about it in that way can already open a new way of how to approach certain problems. Then, like I said, what I appreciated about the Global Water Museum Network is that there are so many different museums in there. Here's just a list. It's not a complete list. Again, I would like to ask your attention for the last one that's there, because we also include local communities and indigenous people in our water museum and global network. And why we think that that's important is that we do think that we have to think about the future, but we also think that learning from the past, learning also from the people that are experiencing water in all different sorts. So it's not only about the people making decisions, but also it's about the people who are using the water. I think that will help us all to improve how we think about water and how we will use water. Then here, just two slides there, because I think the Water Museum may help to change our value of water, our caring of water. On the left side, you see an image from an artist contest that we had for school children last year. We hope that we can repeat this one. And I think I would also recommend you to have a look at what those children produced in there, because I think that will help you to realize how younger people are also looking at the future of water. Then on the right-hand side, I just put one picture. I think the Cauvery Basin in India is another very nice example about sharing of water. This is the Nile Basin that's there. And I think you all know about what's on the board there at the moment. And I think that water musea and exhibitions like this may also help to create different values of water, different perceptions of water, and by that maybe also different opportunities and different ways how to look how we can improve our sharing of water as well. So what I think that changes are there. I think we should realize that the changes are there. I just put a quote in there that I like very much from Albert Einstein. And he's saying we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And I think that's true. I also think that water musea can help in changing our thinking. And I think also by changing our perceptions. And I think those two together are, I think, a very strong tool that's in the hands of the water musea to help to change our thinking and help us how to improve the way how we deal with our waters. And I do hope that that will also take place in Mumbai and the waters around Mumbai. And I'm not only talking about the rivers. I think also on the maritime side, it's quite important that we change the way how we are caring about water and how we can change that. So I wish you good of luck. I think that I had a small look already at the exhibition, so thanks for that, Sarah. But I really will enjoy also the tour that you will give later on, and I hope all the others with us will do as well. So thanks again, and congratulations to all of those that have been working so hard to make this exhibition realized. So thanks, and give the floor back to you, Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much, Eddie. Can you stop your screen share?
Yeah.
Maybe I can do that for you.
Can you do that for me? Escape here.
Okay. All right. So I'm back. Great. Don't spotlight me. So our next speaker is, I think, the reason why we are here, or at least the reason why I am here this evening, and that is Dr. Madhu Kelkar, whose work on Mumbai's water history from 1845 to 1957 is what I heard her present at a conference 2.5 years ago. And it's what really influenced my wanting to do this kind of deep dive into Mumbai's waterscapes, if you like. And Madhu is a professor at the HR College of Commerce and Economics in Bombay. And she has also, for the last couple of years, been the convener of the Asiatic Society of Mumbai. So that's your time now, Madhu, please.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm quite overwhelmed by the introduction that you gave here. And I would like to thank Sarah, Living Waters Museum, as well as the entire team for inviting me for this panel discussion. What I shall do is to take you through a very brief history of Bombay's piped water supply from the colonial to the present times. I have prepared some slides which will show you the maps and some charts, which I feel are quite important, part of the narrative of Mumbai's water history. And most of these have been taken from published and unpublished primary sources. So here in the background, as you can see, is the entire region that is supplying water. This is the core Bombay city. And if you can follow my cursor, and then this is Greater Bombay. And the lakes of Mumbai, which started over here, have now moved on to this region, which is situated in the hinterlands. And over here on the right-hand side, you can see the kind of network of pipes as well as water tanks that has been created in order to supply water to the city. Mumbai's traditional water system consisted of tanks and wells, many of which were constructed by wealthy people of all creeds in the city. So you can see it over here in this map. It is dotted with, there are these black dots and there are these black squares, which all indicate the tanks and wells of the city. And rainwater harvesting was also something very common. Such was the importance of these tanks and wells that many streets were named after them. And in times of scarcity, one finds that they continued to be preserved, they continued to be improved, and a lot of rich natives were prompted to construct more such works. And scarcity was actually an accepted problem, and it was confined only to the months of summer. Now, it was the water crisis of 1845 that proved to be a turning point in the water history of the city, as it led to the appointment of a two-member committee to look into the problem, and subsequently one finds that engineers were called upon to suggest measures to deal with the problem. So the initial proposals that were made by military engineers such as Rivet, Jarvis, Turner, etc., aimed at augmenting the city's traditional water supply, since they unanimously agreed that water shortage was faced only in 3 months of the year. And hence they suggested that elevated reservoirs within the city could be created for rainwater harvesting, and these could then subsequently supply to the existing tanks and wells at the lower levels. Now, the move to go beyond the city and to explore Bihar in the region of Salsette came from a military engineer called Captain J.H.G. Crawford, who also agreed with the opinions of the engineers that except for 3 months of the year, Bombay had sufficient water. But in spite of this view, his scheme of things changed entirely with the entry of the civil engineer, Henry Crawford, who was the superintendent of repairs at this point of time in the fledgling Bombay municipality, and who, considering the promising prospects of the city as a center of trade and commerce, interpreted water scarcity in the light of Bombay's future growth, and therefore suggested a much bigger venture that could supply copious amounts of water to the city. Thus, one finds that the Vihar lake changed in nature completely, and instead of being an undertaking to supplement the existing sources of water, it became an independent enterprise that would exist irrespective of the traditional water systems. However, the gestation and execution of the scheme was mired in controversy right from the beginning, because it was executed in the absence of Henry Conybeare, its chief architect and the one who had designed it, and Henyaj Walker, a very, very deceitful resident engineer, deceitful contractors, Messrs. Bray and Sons. And the works, therefore, that emerged ultimately were extremely defective. They leaked immensely. They caused immense problems to the public. And of course, they imposed a huge debt on the fledgling municipality. Even so, one finds that they set the blueprint for the future growth of the hydraulic systems in the area of urban water management. So here is a map from one of the published sources on Bombay's water supply, which is, this black line is a pipeline that brought water all the way from Salsette to the island city of Bombay. Within 5 years of its formation, Conybeare's calculations regarding Bihar water supply proved absolutely wrong, and driven by the needs for safety, security of the army, and of course the Chadwickian concept of sanitation, commercial development, and so on, wells and tanks of the city were gradually obliterated, and commercial and demographic growth of the city, which was both the cause and effect of the hydraulic technology, compelled the municipality to create Tulsi, Pavai, Tansa, and Vaitarna in quick succession. So 4 schemes were proposed by the end of 1860s. You can see Kanheri, Pavai, Shevla, and Tulsi, out of which Tulsi was favored because it was the cheapest, and the rest of the schemes were not so sound in terms of engineering. So here is the actual Tulsi Lake today, and here you can see it on this map. This is Bihar. This was one of the schemes that was suggested, that is Pavai, and one more scheme, that is Kanheri, that was suggested, and it lay above this, the catchment area lay above Tulsi, and yet another scheme, that is Shevla, for which I could not provide a map. Soon after this, one also finds that service reservoirs were created. These were balancing reservoirs which were required to get for Bombay what is known as the constant supply system. Up till now, there was an intermittent water supply. So the Malabar Hill Reservoir was created sometime in the 1880s to supply this region of South Bombay, and Bhandarwada for the sake of Bihar water to supply, again, a different portion of South Bombay. Powai was created as a knee-jerk response in 1886. It was really not on the, you can say, on the map of water supply, but because there was an acute water famine that stared the city, the municipality had to take an immediate action to deal with this water supply problem. And although Tansa had been sanctioned, yet Powai had to be created. So it was created immediately in 1886. It functioned for around 11 months, and then it was abandoned because the area was not found suitable for actually the supply of potable water. Today, the lake is functional, but of course, it is only supplying water for industrial purposes. Here are a few charts which show you the kind of water consumption that was taking place in the 1880s, and of course, right up till you can say the middle of the 20th century. So here is the population of Bombay, Bombay as in not Greater Bombay, just Bombay city, the core Bombay city from 1872 to 1921, taken from the census of India, and you can see the rapid rise in population. Here is the number of mills that increased probably you can say fueled by the increase in water supply. The number of water connections that went up from 1866 to 1908. And this, of course, is the map of a Google image of Tansa. Now, Tansa itself underwent 4 extensions. It was created in 1892. Again, in 1915, a separate pipeline had to be laid in order to supply the needs of the city, the increasing needs of the city. Again, in 1925, it was extended. That is, the height of the dam was built further. And in 1948, a few more sluices were added to the dam in order to increase the water supply. But yet, it could not quench the thirst of the city. And therefore, the municipality was, you can say, constrained to create the Tansa Kam Vaitarna scheme in 1948, which is the post-partition period. There was a huge influx of population from Pakistan. There was a lot of commercial growth in Mumbai, and therefore, in order to supply the city with adequate water, the Tansa Kam Vaitarna scheme emerged. Now, the Tansa Kam Vaitarna scheme was actually the Vaitarna Lake was actually only supposed to be an auxiliary to Tansa, but by the time it emerged in 1957, you will find that it had turned into an independent lake that started supplying water to the city. It's also known as the Modak Sagar Dam or Modak Sagar Lake because it is named after the engineer who was responsible for the creation of the lake. And this is the kind of water that has been supplied from 1861 to 1939. PHPD over here stands for per head per day. So you can see from 10 million gallons per head per day in 1861, the amount increased to 83 million gallons per head per day. But of course, these figures are not completely reliable. This is the magnificent Tansa Kam Vaitarna scheme. And so this is very briefly the history. So we started in 1860 with Vihar. We went on to Tulsi in 1879. We went on to Tansa in 1892 and further Modak Sagar in 1957. From 1957 onwards, we have also exploited Upper Vaitarna. Over here, we have exploited Middle Vaitarna, which is also complete. And we are being supplied from Bhatsa as well. And now we are looking at Shahi, Kalu, Gargai, Pinjal, all of these areas because Mumbai's water needs seem to be absolutely inexhaustible. So the point that arises is that what have been the characteristics and the lasting legacies of this kind of a water supply system. So if you look at the some of the, you can say, enduring characteristics of all water supply schemes right from 1860 to the present times, one will find that they have had very, very controversial beginnings, very long gestation periods because of the controversies that they were always mired in. And secondly, even though water supply started, the piped water supply started, there was a social apartheid which was visible in this water supply in the manner in which it was being distributed to the people. So obviously it was meant for the army, it was meant for the you can say the British, it was meant for the rich natives. And as far as the masses were concerned, the government actually continued to rely on the charity of the rich natives. So charitable rich natives were supposed to build, or they did build fountains, and the government provided standpipes. Here are some examples of standpipes which were situated at regular distances from which the common man could draw water. And one finds that the standpipes, the fountains, the donation of fountains continues to be reflected in the municipal commissioner's reports even in the 1930s. Now, also at the same time, there was destruction of the traditional water supply systems, and diseases particularly had a very great impact on the quantitative and qualitative aspect of the traditional water supply system. Some of these diseases which are worth mentioning are malaria, cholera, and plague, malaria especially. So if you can see this map of South Bombay, you will find that this heavily dotted region, this concentration of red dots shows the malaria impacted areas of the city. And here is a map which shows the kind of work, the kind of anti-malarial operation that was carried out in this part of the city, that is Fort North and South, where wells were either completely filled in, or they were covered, or they, an attempt was made to cover them at a later point of time. So the British actually went about mapping the entire area to check as to whether which wells were there, and how many of them could be covered under the pretext of anti-malarial operations. This is the status of the tanks, and in 1914, just before the war, and of course in between the wartime. And here is some of the I've just shown you the usage to which the land was put when the tanks were filled in. So you had recreation grounds, gardens, we had schools and other kind of buildings that were created as a result of the filling in of tanks and wells in the particularly tanks in the city. And of course, some of the lasting legacies also have been in the area of changed relationship with water, which became increasingly commodified, which could be bought and sold, and also it became an item of comfort because it could be easily brought into the household, thereby increasing its profligate consumption. So waste of water became a very, very major problem because of the kind of leakages that were created as a result of the underground water supply system. So here I've just collated data from various municipal reports to show you the kind of overground and underground defects that were found in, starting from 1906 to 1935-36, and which were responsible for immense amounts of water leakage. And this problem continues, or you can say persists in the current scenario also. And other things that at the same time were, you can say also, they were institutionalized, were that this kind of a water management brought in a lot of challenges. So to deal with these challenges, there were changes that were brought about in municipal organization of the city, resulting in the centralization of the authority of the municipality. It brought in a surveillance mechanism because for water supply sources, creation of water supply sources, thorough investigations were required as regards the area to be tapped, the quantity, quality, methods of distribution, and so on. Also, one finds that there were professional rivalries. There was a flawed transfer of technology, which was, just taken from the British scenario, and it was just implemented in India without any reference to India's climate, India's topography, and so on and so forth. And finally, if you look at the long-term impacts, of course, not immediately they were not visible immediately in the city, but they were very much visible in the hinterlands and the outskirts of the city. You will find that land alienation and displacement became a permanent feature of all extended water supply systems. So this happened because the city became increasingly dependent upon the hinterlands for a supply of pure water. And it began with Vihar, and it is really heartrending to note that there was not adequate compensation that was given in colonial times. It was just given for the money that the people had spent on improving their lands. There was no compensation for occupation. These people were never taken into confidence as far as confiscation of land was concerned. And therefore one can, and of course this last slide, where I wanted to just show you the kind of area that was impacted as a result of the creation of the water supply system. This is the old Thana Collectorate, and these are the various divisions of the Thana Collectorate which go into the hinterlands. Bombay is located in this one tiny corner. So all of these areas, whether it is Vasai or Bhivandi, Kalyan, Shahapur, Murud, Vada, all of these areas were tremendously impacted, especially the tribals staying in these areas were tremendously impacted as a result of the creation of the water supply systems. So one can only say that probably this water supply came to symbolize abundance. It came to probably show the moral and social superiority of its creators. Of course, it also showed the superiority of their scientific knowledge, of their technological development. But it really did not result in the, you can say, there was no equality as such in terms of its distribution or in terms of the diffusion of its benefit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhu. That I know was rather hard for you to condense, a lifetime of work in 10 minutes. So I want to thank you for that. The story of Bombay's water development is what we see across the country and probably in many other countries as well, how urban water supplies have grown often at the cost of the hinterland, or lakes or groundwater extraction, people, livelihoods, etc. A lot of that is captured in the exhibition that you will see online very soon. So I won't go into it, but because we've had two rather interesting and very, very full presentations from Eddy and from Madhu, I just want to take a 5-minute pause before we go into the next two presentations and ask if there are any questions. So there are some in the chat box. Madhu, what were the sources of water for the tanks that were filled in during the anti-malarial operations?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
What were the sources of water for the tanks that were filled in during the anti-malaria operations?
Most of these tanks had, either they were tanks that were filled in by rainwater, or they had their own, underground, you can say, water sources from which the tanks would fill up.
Right. Okay, so basically underground water, right?
Yes.
Are there any other very quick questions for either? Okay, there's another one from.
Did the new rivers were created because of new lakes? Yes. Actually, when I did my work, I did not come across any mention of the Methi River at all. So as far as I know, Methi River was the creation of the spillage that was created because of the making of Vihar.
Okay. We can also come back to more questions a bit later, but I'd like to introduce the next speaker, which is Nupur Prothi Khanna, who lives between Stockholm and India. And Nupur is an architect who has been also working quite a bit in recent years, looking at public initiatives which link heritage, ecology, and the contemporary challenge of providing water. And she's also very passionate about taking her work to youth and children. And she's recently completed a project with children from urban marginalized communities in India for the Swed Bio and the Stockholm Resilience Center. And Nupur is also on the board of ICOMOS, the International Council on Monuments and Sites. And she's leading or co-leading the group on water and heritage. Nupur, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sukrit. And thank you, Ikshita, for this wonderful work you've done with the Water Museum Network. I am a planner and a landscape architect, Sarah. But I think I've after 25 years of working, I complete 25 years in March this year. And I find that I'm kind of starting my life pretty much from a seed again. And it's beautiful when you are trying to reinvent yourself to start working with children, because I think that's where my inspiration comes from. So let me tell you something that I was reading from a book this morning. It's a book called The Curious Incident, written for children from the perspective of a child who has Asperger's. And he says, it's a rainy morning, he's looking out of his window and he says, and it made me think how all the water in the world was connected. And this water had evaporated from the oceans somewhere in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico or Baffin Bay, and now it was falling in front of the house. And it would drain away into the gutters and flow to a sewage system where it would be cleaned, and then it would go into a river and go back into the ocean again. So here is a child's very simplistic perspective of what we've been talking about and what we talk about the various cycles and our scientific approach and all our research. So let me start with where Sarah wanted me to speak. She said I should talk about facilitating collaborative partnerships in water education for a new water ethics. I'm going to start from the end. I'm going to talk about 2 minutes on water ethics, a few minutes on water education, and a few minutes on collaborative partnerships. While doing work for an affiliate of the Water Ministry in India, I got to travel across a very large part of the Indian terrain, something I hadn't done earlier living in India for a long time. And I got to visit many water systems, tanks, baulis, rivers. We were designing a lot of stuff. We were meeting people. But what was very intriguing for me was that in a country where our traditional way of life continues, we still, in many cultures and religions, pour the water of the holy river in the lips of the corpse after death. We take our water very, very seriously in all our religions in India. It's so much part of our being. How come the water systems, while we were living, were in such a bad shape? How come the water levels, whether it was a small community in a far-flung region or a village, polluted as was it in the metropolises? So that's where I started thinking of what can we do, this water ethic, which really is part of our life. It sort of seems to have dimmed, or I used to call it a disconnect between what we chant in our different, mantras, in our different ways, but what we do, there's a de-link. And I kept sort of started to think about how do we link these two. And then when I would go to the various sites, I would find in a place where there were natural springs, I would find contractors trying to concretize the base and then complain, saying that the water just doesn't stop coming out. We are making the base concrete, not recognizing that here was nature and you had to appreciate and celebrate it and not try to concretize it. And then another incident where I was looking for a water tank and it was completely obliterated, like what Madhu's mentioned, but the name still remained a pokery. And I kept asking people where the pokery was because I knew the name of the pond was there. The pond had to be there. I found it, again, completely covered, filled in, but the names existed, the ethic existed, the stories existed, but the landscape was completely, becoming something else because of our whole sort of definition of development. So there I started thinking of education. I started thinking of orientation. I started thinking of how can we bring water back into the contemporary education, the contemporary way in which children foresee their landscape. And I chose children very strategically because after working with adults for 25 years, apologies to all the adults in the network here, I realized that it's very difficult to change the way an adult has been brought up to think about their landscape, to think about their heritage. And I felt that if I start working with children, I might get inspired myself, I might learn from them. And so here came as part of ICOMOS and IUCN, we were working on the Connecting Practice project, where we were looking at culture, nature, relationships, and we were looking at a lot of journeys at a more professional level. I started looking at it from a child's perspective. So here is where this project took birth. I was called on to look at something that we were already doing in India through Beyond Build, and asked if we could go on with it. And I said, no, my passion is I want to work with children. We took on 2 partners, ecologists from Care Earth Trust and social workers from Ankur. And we said, we're going to work with children in a marginalized community to see how they work with their nature. And one thing I'd like to leave you all with on this topic of water education is the children wrote stories about their environment. They wrote stories about how during monsoons, the water doesn't know how to escape. It's in a chakravyuh. They wrote stories about how they came from villages where water was so openly available, but in the cities where they had to buy water, and their neighbors were actually selling water in those little, carts. But then they all spoke about one thing, which as a planner and a landscape architect, I had never thought of. They all spoke about the smell of water. I still get goosebumps when I'm telling you this, because in every story, they spoke about the smell of water coming through the tank. They spoke about the smell of water in the channel running by their houses. And it was, they spoke of water in the areas which they call the dhobi ghats, where their clothes are washed in machines. Everywhere, all pervasive was the smell. And it was not an accident that this community that we worked with resided next to one of the largest landfill sites, which is in Delhi. So now I come to the last bit about collaborative partnerships. Here is where I started thinking that the only way we're going to make any difference on the ground, being a practitioner for a large part of my life, teaching in as a guest faculty in many universities, I started realizing the only way we're going to be making a difference was through collaboration and communication. And communication meaning that if we are going to be working with the sciences, the social sciences, professionals in the heritage and water and design sector, we had to talk a different language. We had to come to a language which would immediately click with everyone. We had to simplify our message. And that's also where the children came in. So in the many endeavors that we took up, we started looking at, that's where I got connected with Sarah at the Great Rivers Forum in Wuhan. We set up an ISC, an International Scientific Committee on Water within ICOMOS. So we started doing a lot of collaboration, but not collaboration only between institutes, collaboration between humans, collaboration between people who wanted to make a difference, keeping our passion, our need to be change makers as the pivot. It didn't matter what our backgrounds were. It didn't matter what our seniority was. What mattered was what we wanted to do. So I'll just like to end with one inspirational moment that both Sarah and I have shared in our journey. And that moment was at this Great Rivers Forum in Wuhan, where Sarah was on the stage and I was in the audience. And that image has never left me, where there was a large trough and professionals from all over the world were asked to bring small canisters of water from the great rivers in their countries. And these waters were being poured into this vessel, into this canister, bringing me back to the story of this young child, where when all the waters mixed, I sitting in the audience just thought to myself, isn't that what the whole story is? That it's waters which connect each one of us, irrespective of whatever work we do, in whichever domain we work, and waters that connect every community and every person. So why don't we start not separating ourselves as a community professional and a municipal person? We start looking at what unites us. And it's really the water systems and the water itself that unites all of us. So thank you very much, Sarah, for this opportunity. It's a beautiful way for me to spend my Sunday morning. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nupur, and also for bringing up that image of the conference at Wuhan, where I think I was invited to pour in water from the Ganges, from the Ganga, representing India. Phillipe is the next speaker, and I know that Phillipe was very much behind that idea. There's a storm brewing outside my window, so in case I lose connectivity, the team will, of course, take over and manage the rest of this. But it is now my privilege to introduce our last speaker, Phillipe Pypaert, who has been working with UNESCO since 1994. as the program specialist in natural sciences, first in the Venice office, which is where I met him in 2017 when we launched the Global Network of Water Museums. And Phillipe is currently in Beijing with the Eastern Asia office, obviously right now still in Italy under the lockdown. And Phillipe is responsible for many of the environmental programs with UNESCO, such as the People and Biosphere. Sorry, Phillipe, I'm not going to say Man and Biosphere. I've changed it to People. And the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, as well as other initiatives dedicated to eco-hydrology. Phillipe is very interested in the connection between water, arts, and youth, and he is a focal point for education for sustainable development within UNESCO as well. So Phillipe, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, everyone. The speeches before me were very inspiring, and I really would like to congratulate you for this great opportunity and working virtual, but still giving us a lot of input for our networks and our thinking and our actions. So I'm very impressed by what you are doing, particularly in India in these times. Yes, you've mentioned Wuhan, and some of you know that Confluence was the first title I had suggested for that event. And I was inspired by exactly what inspired you now for this virtual exhibition and the Mumbai narratives. Not just because Wuhan in China is sitting at the confluence between two major rivers, the Yangtze and the Hanjiang rivers. That was too obvious. It's a symbol of the city. But for me, what's already that really based on a strong desire I had to break silos and connect those different disciplines and even sectors and programs in UNESCO where we used to work very isolated. And I was feeling that as a real necessity. In particular, we want to address issues like water in the urban landscape, waterscapes in general. And that's what we try to do. And I'm very happy you mentioned it because visibly it inspired a lot of us. And it's a kind of challenge, but then when it works, it's really, really motivating and moving us a lot. And so we had engineers, architects, urban planners, historian, anthropological, social scientists, managers, engineers. That was really, really impressive. And that's still inspiring us working this way. So it's very nice to see that you follow this kind of inspiration, also now launching the Mumbai Waters narratives. I see the same mixture of discipline, of professions, and that's really great. And I strongly support this kind of approach. Today in our calendar, it's also springtime here in Europe. So we expect to leave winter time and progressively go to the summertime. We also hope this is bringing hope that then we will go out also of a pandemic. And but I noticed this also day of an International Day of Poetry. Tomorrow will be International Day of Water, but today is poetry. So we're talking about art, about writing, about poesy. And I think that Confluence for me and the Confluence spirit, let's say, is very much exactly in this, the variety of forms of expression you want to use to reach more people and touch them, impact them differently. And again, I'm very, very impressed by this virtual exhibition. In fact, the wide range of forms of expression you use and stimulate to realize those things: storytelling, graphic art, photographs, video, digital technology, music, as we heard at the opening this launch this afternoon or this morning or this evening. That's really exactly how we have to work. And I think this is the kind of spirit which is very much behind, as also Eddy stressed in his presentation, which is behind the establishment of the Water Museums Network. So that even in UNESCO, in the framework of a scientific program, intergovernmental hydrological program, this a recognition of the need to use also other forms of expression to reach our goal and really impact the world community about water, its importance, and the need for cherishing it more. So tomorrow we will celebrate the World Water Day, and this is the day when UNESCO, the World Water Assessment Program, FAO, many agencies celebrate also the launch of the annual World Water Development Report. It's very interesting to note that tomorrow we will launch in the 2021 report dedicated to valuing water, the values of water. So definitely it's a report taking the importance of water from very different angles and kind of tools and understanding. That's really a great thing. But it remains a report which is for specialists, which is for officers and ministers, for managers. I don't know how many people read through this report, but you see, together with that, which is very important, we need in fact to tell the same stories. And I've been impressed by a book you have shared with us, Sarah, this week, which is exactly showing the variety through stories, through the witness of people who are doing something differently, and telling those stories very simply but very efficiently. Then we can really impact and teach the world how to better use, respect, manage this resource called water. And it leads me to art, not just because of poetry or graphic art or what we are using today for the exhibition, for example. Just to stress the fact that in fact we need more than just understanding and being provided the knowledge we need to properly plan, manage water. As also Eddy and all of you before me stress, so this importance of emotional reconnection with water. And just because it's very simple, I think we care about what we love and we need to know what we love. So there's no other way to stimulate people to care more about water. I think sometimes, graphs or reports, scientific reports, can tell us the truth about the status of water. This is the purpose of the World Water Development Report, but at the same time, images, movies, stories, poetry, songs, also taken from our tradition, can help us reaching many more people. And I like very much the idea of the Water We Want contest. Also, Eddy mentioned before. I'm happy we are going for the second edition, second year, because there's something very effective in this. In fact, this is inviting children, kids, mainly the schools connected to the Water Museum, to elaborate those messages using different kinds of forms of expression. So this is the image, the drawing, the video, I hope also the music and the songs. And what's interesting is that this is done by the children themselves. And this is reaching, I would say, not only children, but definitely they speak the same language, so they can really be very effective in bringing that message to many others. I think millions of children across the world, and that's the audience of that contest. But I think they speak also to adults. And as you said, Nupur, that's very interesting. So when we're back in a cycle of life, back to kind of initial point, to start or reconnect to children, have the courage to look at the world, have they see it, have they experience it in different parts of the world. That's also the richness of doing that on the global network. So we really also have the chance to stop looking at things just from our own perspective in a particular country, particular situation, but can have a much richer view and look on the world and on water and the situation of water around in particular. So I think children are very effective in using those tools. I think we have had fantastic works selected last year, and we will have again a lot of them. And that's why, based on a contest, we decided to communicate to the rest of the world. So we made that campaign using their images, their artistic production, to just deliver messages through the social media, on web pages, and this is still running. These days we're discussing how to expand that more in the Arabic Peninsula, and this is going around this way. So the language, which is art in general, and when it's done by children, particularly, it's very powerful to help us reach a goal. And I will conclude with that. I'm very impressed. As I told you, there was a challenge in a scientific program at HP to launch a water museum network, but then I see a super great interest for what we are producing and doing together, just because there is a sense of complementarity and an acceptance that we could reach a kind of audience up to now, but then with the museums and when engaging with this wider community of people, of professions and artists, we can be much more powerful in reaching that audience worldwide and stressing the importance of water. So thank to you for what you're doing in India, not only because this is open to a world audience, and that's very impressive and definitely very well serving those purposes we have in the program in UNESCO and in the Global Network of Water Museum in particular. So hope we have another opportunity of Confluence very soon. I don't know where, but not only on the net, but this will come for sure. And that's very nice to see that even in those conditions, in fact, a network.
Thank you so much, Philippe. And yes, I'm also hoping that we can have a physical meeting soon. It's been a long time missing everyone. But I think the audience here, which I kind of know most of the people online in some form or the other, as our contributors, as artists, as scientists, as water specialists, I think it's great that we can look at this interdisciplinary confluence in many ways. And beginning with education, as Nupur said, with young people, with children, but also the kind of work that IHE is doing in Delft, the capacity building, linking issues of equity and gender and hydrology and everything together. It's so important to get those paradigms and that ethical paradigms out. So I'm going to stop talking because the moment everyone has been waiting for is to actually see Confluence online. Ipshita is going to take us through a few highlights. Obviously, you will need quite a bit of time to browse through the exhibition at leisure with your coffee or your glass of wine or whatever it is. So do it over multiple days. There are events this whole week, which will take you through some of the galleries, and the curators will speak as to their vision and what inspired them and the work that they put together. But I'm not going to say more because I think Ipshita has been holding fort. And Ipshita, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. I will just do a screen share of the site.
Okay. And I know you have a backup video in case the internet goes somewhere.
So I would just like you to take everyone through the website. We are very excited to launch it. Just to explain how the navigation of the website works. Confluence has actually been conceptualized in a very short period of time, I think in less than 6 months. And that has been kudos to all the contributors in the design and tech team and the Living Waters Museum team in particular for bringing this all together. As Sarah mentioned, every day we will have events for the next week, ending on the 27th of March. We have curatorial walks by artists who have contributed to the galleries, and we have panel discussions, and we also have film festivals on the site. So I will go through the events page a little later. The endeavor of rethinking urban waterscapes was to, a year since the lockdown and in time for World Water Day, was to trace a history of Mumbai's water heritage to the current crisis that we are in. There were 6 thematic galleries that we looked at: built heritage, culture, livelihoods, saline waters, access to water, and public health. And we basically looked at how each of these have also been exacerbated during the pandemic. We called for contributions by contributors who are embedded in these inquiries in different ways over their careers. And we thought, how do we make this information a lot more accessible? So how do we involve new media, technology, and arts to do so? I'll just go through each of the questions that each gallery asked, each curatorial viewing room asked. So water and built heritage. We asked how can the journey of water in the city be traced from architectural manifestations of holding water, sharing water, from this narrative of abundance to this current narrative of scarcity and inequity. In water and culture, we looked at myths, faiths, rituals of communities around water, while also questioning what is the meaning of sacred when it comes to water. In water and livelihoods, we looked at the forms of economic profiteering and commodification of water and how livelihoods of those dependent on water are endangered by it. In saline waters, we looked at how rising waters and climate change have been destroying our marine ecosystems and the communities that have been dependent on it. In water and equity, we looked at how can we ensure that equitable access to water becomes a basic right, transcending all socio-economic barriers. And finally, to public health, we traced a timeline of all waterborne diseases in Bombay to finally coming to the current crisis that we are in. We would like to thank all our institutional partners who have contributed to the project. Over the past year, we also had Instagram open calls, social media open calls, wherein we called for family photos and memories of water, and we have tried to use it across the galleries wherever possible. Very quickly going through all 6 galleries and the 25 exhibits within it. Water and Built Heritage, which has been curated by Jinisha Lodaya, Minaz Ansari, Rahul Chamburkar, and Ritu Deshmukh, has 4 exhibits. Water and City traced a timeline of Mumbai's water heritage up to the current narrative of piped water systems. Untold Stories of Navi Mumbai looked at how water conservation can be planned within the built fabric of the city itself. Once Upon a Pyao by Rahul Chamburkar looked at the conservation efforts for Mumbai's drinking water fountains. Water and Culture by Jinisha Lodaya and Manaz Ansari looked at rituals and faiths and beliefs of various communities around water. And they also have a very fun exhibit of writing postcards to water and having them written back to us. Water and Livelihoods had contributions from Ajay Nayak, Aslam Sayat, Kemak Eliskar, Vikram Pawar, and me, and 3 exhibits within it. The last Bhishtis look at the economic condition of Bhishtis who are water carriers and are still remaining in Mumbai, while the original Niti and Afloat look at the various stakeholders across Mumbai's rivers and how the destruction of rivers and the commodification of water have actually endangered their livelihoods. Saline Waters has exhibits contributed by Ami Joshi, Marine Life of Mumbai, and Parag Tande. Marine Life of Mumbai brings Mumbai's hidden marine ecosystems to our screen. And we have a very fun exhibit that I'll show in some time. Ami looks at the cyclic routines of life around water. So how have communities in Bombay adapted in a way to these recurring floods that happen in the city every year? Parag Pandey looks at a recipe book of dried fish recipes while also looking at memories of loss and preservation of the Koli community from which he belongs. Water and Equity features work by the Panihak Samiti and Siddesh Gautam and Prachi and Suraj. A Tale for the Years marks the journey of the Panihak Samiti, and through them shows individual stories of struggle for access to water within the informal settlements in Mumbai. The Mahad Satyagraha by Siddesh Gautam shows the history of the Mahad Satyagraha and the politics of purity when it comes to access to all carts to water even today. Coming finally to water and public health, we have a timeline that looks at all the waterborne diseases in Mumbai till date, coming finally to our current crisis of public health. And COVID and access to water shows the overlaps of those areas with water scarcity with coronavirus hotspots. So drawing a clear link between how water scarcity has actually exacerbated the pandemic. I will go through some of the exhibits. Some of the exhibits will require a little bit of interactivity from the part of the user, like the Water and the City timeline will require scrolling through, but it has archival images and it traces a journey completely to the piped water systems that we have today. We also would ask you to look at Afloat, The Rise of Mumbai, the Fall of its Waterscapes by Water Environs, and toggle through the various maps across various eras of Mumbai to see how riverscapes in Mumbai has changed over the years. We also have an interactive exhibit where you can click on the icons and to know more about the stakeholders of Bombay, the stakeholders of inhabitants of who live next to the rivers of Bombay. I will only go through a few of them, and I hope that we will be able to see the others in detail. The Marine Life of Mumbai exhibit asks us to zoom in, pan, scroll, and find all these marine creatures within which are hidden across Mumbai's ecosystem, across Mumbai's coast, and we get them on the screen, and you can click on them and get more information on them. Finally, because this exhibition has been largely virtual, we also have a few downloadables, free downloads and ebooks that you can look at, and hopefully that you will have a physical relic of an exhibition that has been so far virtual. As I mentioned earlier, we have events every day, 2 events per day for the next week, ending on the 27th of March. This website, this exhibition site is also a site for film screenings. So on the 25th of March, for the Saline Waters panel with Ajay Nayak, Parag Tande, Pradeep Indulkar and Aditi Chitre, we have 2 film screenings that will happen for 24 hours. One is High Power on the Tarapur power plant displacement, and the other is A Can of Fish, an animated movie by Aditi Chitre. So please stay tuned on the site.
एक टीवी लेना है तो उसका सिस्टम आपका चल
Finally, we would like to reiterate that Confluence was only the first step when it came to collating all the water narratives around Bombay, and we hope that
Sony
and we hope that more stories can come in through your contribution. So please write to us at Living Waters Museum or mumbaiwaternarratives.in at @gmail.com. I will also be sharing this Confluence website link on the chat box, and it will be mailed to all the people who have been registered on the site. And we hope that this becomes a space which is fertile for future collaborations, that we have several other exhibitions that will be lined up across the years annually. And we hope that we'll be able to make our mark in the water sector, in the education sector, and also affect real change on the ground eventually through this project. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, wow, Dipshita, thank you. I know that it's quite overwhelming to see all of this at one go. There's so much work here, and there's so much to sort of read and scroll and interact with. But I do think we still have another 5-10 minutes. If there are any questions from anyone on the in the audience to ask to the team, not just to me, but I think we're open. And if anyone wants to speak, raise your hand. There's a hand button. You can raise a hand and we can unmute you. So I'm keeping it open right now. Bhargav and Sukrit, you can do the unmuting. So someone wants to ask a question? Raise your hand. Let me see if I can see everyone. Why don't we just unmute everyone right now so that we don't, because I can't see everyone. Yeah, there are also a couple of physical walks coming up. We've just been reminded of one that that Aslam is doing, or has he already done his walk? Okay, there's one on the 28th of March. Yeah, and I think the Marine Life team is also doing a walk on the 31st of March, right? Ikshita? Yeah. So we had initially thought of this as a hybrid exhibition, but with the second or third wave of COVID that has now come into India and particularly into Mumbai in a rather big and alarming way, we've had to cancel all physical events. But if there are any questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, I'd like to thank everyone.
I have a question.
Yeah, I see a question by Ritu Deshmukh in the chat.
Sorry, I'm not looking at the chat. Yeah, someone else just said they had a question.
Yeah, my name is Sripad. I have a question.
Sure, Shripad, yeah. Go ahead.
Can I ask or should I wait?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Sripad. I am an economist and I'm joining all of you from Massachusetts, Boston.
Okay.
I work on the ecology of Mumbai and I'm really thank you to all of you. I have a question. This is much more from the perspective of somebody who is interested in policy and political economy. We see that the water use, water systems, the way water has been conceptualized has been changing from, the colonial times. My question is, in the last 2 to 3 decades, we have a new paradigm in the country, a new policy paradigm, economic reforms. So I want to just know whether this shift in policy has made a difference to the way water has been conceptualized, and whether there's a worsening of the water situation in Mumbai in the last 2 3 decades because of these change in policies.
So does anyone on the team want to answer this, or shall I have a go? Madhu?
I don't think that I can answer this question. Okay. I have not done enough research in the economics part of it.
Right. So I think, the policy changes, the commodification of water, the structural reforms that took place in the water sector over the last 20 years, yes, they are leading to, I don't know if one can say blanketly greater inequality in terms of access. I'm not sure if anyone from the Pani Haq Samiti is here to answer that for you. But definitely there are many issues and conflicts over the right to water, over water pricing, but at the same time, we're also seeing an interest in the revival of community water sources through the Jal Jeevan mission. We're seeing a focus on some of the water heritage that had been abandoned in the past, and how that is being used and being seen as not just as a secondary source, but as a supplement to the pipeline system. So India is a very complex country. There are a lot of juxtapositions in terms of policy here. I think the other day we had a very interesting talk on participatory water governance, and we're really seeing what is happening in terms of groundwater use in India and where that is. So we still don't have a policy that regulates our groundwater extractions, which is, of course, the major source for agriculture and domestic water use.
Thank you.
Sitaram sir would like to answer the question.
Yeah, sure, Sitaram.
May I?
Yes, please, Sitaram. Didn't see you earlier.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah, Ekshita. It's really great work. About the policy, means it's clearly that after 1996, we have a big shift in the water policy in Mumbai and in Maharashtra. So in Mumbai, very specifically, we came with the amendment stating that any constructions, illegal constructions came into existence after 1st January 1995 will not get access to water supply. And actually, before that, Mumbai Slum Act in Maharashtra is giving a mandate to the municipal corporation that they should provide water to each and every settlements, even though they are not recognized, they are not formalized. So in 1996, municipal corporation changes the rules. So you can see that after that change and implementation of that change, you can see that emergence of the intermittent water suppliers. Basically, this is the nexus. And previously, everyone used to get very easily the water supply. And then it got disturbed with this policy and regime. And then now there is 2 million people are not having formal access to the water supply. That is one part. And another policy is how to commercialize water. So Mumbai Municipal Corporation closed all the pyouts and all the wells. The pyouts is basically water fountains run by any charitable organization. And when we realized that why they are closing it, then they started a new concept called water ATM. So basically, they are introduce the water ATMs idea, and means the commercialization of the water supply. They came up with this policy of closing down the public water taps. That is how it is impacting, and it is now worsening the situation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. That's.
I may just like to add to this, although I don't know how much of it really would relate to Mr. Motiram's question, but if you look at this South Asia network on dams, rivers and people, they reported 2014, you will find that this report very clearly says that there is a very exaggerated notion about the amount of water that is required by Bombay. So they have said that we don't really require the 4,240 million liters a day that is projected by the Bombay Municipal Corporation, and it is used as a pretext for searching for newer areas for water supply. So if we could just reduce the inefficiency of supply, if we could do rainwater harvesting, etc., there is actually no shortfall. So maybe some kind of a policy correction measure is required over here that could solve the problem.
Thank you, Madhu.
Thank you.
This is a question from Ritu. Ritu, are you online? Would you like to read your question? Ritu?
Yes, I am online.
Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this initiative. And I'm very happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just ask the question, Ritu, the one that you wrote in the chat box. Yeah.
Yes, just because all the panelists who are here are representing the various organizations. This was my question, that how do you have the path ahead charted out for making an equitable kind of distribution system for water and communities?
So I think the question was to UNESCO and ICOMOS.
Yes, UNESCO and ICOMOS and all the global organizations.
Yeah, and IHE in the work that they do. How can we contribute to carving out better equitable opportunities in water distribution and consumption? I think a little bit of what you were saying, Nupur, in terms of international collaborations, but would any of you like to answer that question?
I wouldn't mind, Sarah.
Yes, please, Eddie.
Yeah. Maybe first of all, I think also on the discussion that we had just before, I also think that at the moment in India, there's a lot of attention for the reuse of water. Right. And I think that's another development. And I think in line with what was just said, I think it's quite important indeed to reevaluate the amount of water that's required, but also how you use the water. And again, there, I think people's perceptions about the reuse of water is quite important. So I think musea and exhibitions and other things like that can play a big role in how people will accept water that's being treated and being used then again. So I think that's an important part. And maybe to start from a global perspective on what can be done, I do think that with the United Nations supporting the accelerators framework for SDG 6, which is mainly about drinking water and water resources management. In there are 5 accelerators. One of them is being capacity development, where also we as IHE are quite interested to see how we can help, because we do think that we have to do things differently. And I think by training and education, that's important. So I also very much appreciated what was said about engaging with children, because I think that's important. It's not only children. I think it's through all age classes that we should engage. And I think in there, what they're also trying to do is to see how you can come up with a different way, how you can finance certain improvements, because often that's also something that is a barrier that we have to bridge before we can continue. Of course, there it's about the rights of water. So do you have access to water? Should you pay for water? All those things are quite difficult. And I do think that you need this double approach. That means that you have to go, say, from the level of the UN, but especially I think on what then the member states from the UN are doing within their specific countries. And of course, also from the other side, where you're working from the ground upwards and come up with solutions that help in the specific setting of where you're living and what's possible there. And I do think that those solutions are quite different from one another. So you have to be very careful that you include, say, implementable solutions. And that also will help to, I think, improve the sharing of water. And I think it's not an easy one. It's, I gave the example of Egypt, and with the dam that are now being filled. I think next month, there's a new dam coming there. Tomorrow, there's a webinar by the Egyptian government about sharing how important it is. That's on the big level, but you also have it at the small level. It can between neighbors, can between cities and villages. And I think that's also what's happening in Mumbai. So I think that changing perceptions, but also by engaging with one another is the only way forward that we can have. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddy. Phillipe or Nupur, Clive, you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to raise the point that I mentioned in chat with you, Sarah. We use an enormous amount of our water for transporting feces, and as well as water health, we have great issues around the world to do with soil health. We've recently been working with a university in South Korea on the use of human feces as a soil improver and biofuel.
Right.
I think it's very strange. I mean, historically, we've used the same water system for drinking and washing and
waste disposal,
and also for the transport of human waste, which has a value.
Right.
I just wonder, I know what's being done in South Korea, but is there any work being done to alleviate the use of water for transporting, human waste and use as a soil improver and whatever?
Can I interrupt here?
Yes, Madhu.
There was a lot of this, this idea of using sewage water for farming purposes that one does come across in the colonial times. So we have, when the underground drainage and sewerage was created, but of course, all those were dismissed for as unsound proposals. So I think it makes a lot of sense to reconsider.
I know organizations like WaterAid. I don't know if there's anyone from WaterAid in the audience here, but I know that the kind of next stage work that people are doing around water is on fecal management. There's a word for it, decentralized fecal something, and looking at decentralized systems for exactly the kind of thing you're talking about, Clive. But in India, there have always been cultural issues around using night soil and human waste. But it is being used in certain states. It is being used to generate electricity and power and so forth. And also, it's not that it's not used. But we do have a lot of examples in India of biogas being used as slurry, as to cook. There are a lot of these biogas stoves across rural India. So that's a little more acceptable. But human fecal matter is still a bit of an issue.
Yeah, there are quite a lot of new technologies coming out, which make it a much more viable option.
Right.
I think it will come, but I think it is.
Yeah. No, I think there is work happening in India with other like WaterAid and all, but I don't see anyone here that can speak on that. There were a couple of other hands that went up.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to take.
Yeah, Nupur.
The question.
Yes, you can answer the question. And Philippe, did you have your hand up as well? Okay, after Nupur. Sorry, yeah. I think you're muted, Philippe. Yeah.
Yeah, no worry, no worry.
Yeah, go ahead, Nupur.
So quickly, right. So I just wanted to say a quick word about ICOMOS. So while we have a scientific plan, we're really an organization made of members. And what is very interesting in that is that when a member decides to sort of be part of an initiative or start an initiative, it gets a sort of a wind beneath that person's wings, because a lot of people come together and make something larger of it. And you can see this in the committees that are working on the rights-based approach within ICOMOS. You can see it in the committees that are being set up, like the ISC on water and heritage. You can see it on the Climate Action Committee. So it was started by one or a few people, and now it's really taking into account where it's trying to fit in the idea of culture and cultural heritage in the narrative on WASH. So water, sanitation, and hygiene. It's looking at, I'll give a quick example on the Stockholm Water Week, where ICOMOS International with a couple of other organizations set up a session within the Stockholm Water Week. And I remember the first conversation where we were dealing with a situation where they didn't understand what our perspective was. So I think ICOMOS is now really working with organizations outside its fold, trying to say that heritage has a very critical role to play in the future. So in climate action, in the whole idea of the Sustainable Development Goal and the Decade of Action, 2020 to 2030, and in the RBA, in the rights-based approach sector. So ICOMOS is a place where a lot of action is taking place, looking at how we can make this journey more equitable, and looking at forums and media of pulling together the community stories and connecting it with the institutional impact. So yeah, I just wanted to add that, Sarah.
So we are, the global network of water museums is trying to collaborate with ICOMOS to organize a workshop on, I think around World Museum Day, May 18th, on capacity building around water and cultural heritage, and also to try and get this whole notion of water, our water heritage, on the Sustainable Development Agenda, SDG agenda. So that's really important, because the first time that heritage and water heritage was mentioned was in the World Water Forum in Brazil in 2018. I've been going to a few water forums and never ever heard the word water heritage there till Brazil, so it's great to see that happening. Philippe?
Yeah, and then with that, then a quick remark on the water sharing issue. Yeah, heritage, that's the purpose of the Water Museum network, to exactly bring it. But as we always have to fight about that, it's always to explain people, in particular for newcomers, that they're not just looking at the past and the beauties and trying to display the old civilization. You remember all the debate we had even in China, in Wuhan in particular, where they're very keen to present the past because it's part of their history or legends. I mean, and they're very keen to present it this way. There is an entity now in Beijing wanting to create a center in UNESCO Category 2 center on water culture. And again, I had to explain that very clearly. So we look at how much we can gain in terms of knowledge, of experience from the past to innovate and invent new solutions today. Things I've seen even in your exhibition. So these are I've seen several times already the mix of something we've learned from the past, a kind of traditional knowledge and practice, but also combined with innovation, with technology, with why not tomorrow artificial intelligence, and to have solutions for the future challenge. We have several years ago produced in UNESCO with Pietro Laureano in Italy, the so-called World Water Atlas, and exactly documenting all around the world traditional knowledge, practice, settlements, a lot of heritage sites, which in fact were systems for managing water, where water seemed to be scarce, like the Oasis system, Canats, and all these systems. That's a very huge documentary. Again, the purpose was not to accumulate knowledge about those systems from the past, but to really see what we can learn from that. I've seen in one example in the book you shared with us, Sarah, capturing water from the air, through the cooling system. That's something the stone walls and many systems in the desert were just doing for decades, for centuries, for millennia. So that's really interesting. Always having a look at how we combine that with the knowledge we have today and technology we have today to invent new solutions. On the sharing water, I see that as a big issue. Of course, UNESCO does not intervene so much on how water is distributed in a single country, in a single city. We are more on providing scientific and technological basis for innovating and, in fact, finding the proper solution. I would say that in terms of intergovernmental platforms we offer, of course, this is a basis for negotiating the sharing of water, in particular among countries along the same river, around the same lake. The Nile is an example of where we work a lot to establish those kind of bases and let's say, looking at the scientific knowledge we have about the quantity of water which is moving. We try to also support decision making among countries, and we have used this multi-purpose approach there to really, first of all, create a spirit of cooperation, of sharing, which is not easy. And I see that, as you mentioned also, that I'm dealing with education for sustainable development. That's still the biggest challenge we have, that create really this culture in every person on the planet, that we are sharing the planet, we are sharing the resource. Nothing is ours, really. And that's the most difficult challenge I see. And I think that the pandemic these days is just demonstrating how big is that challenge. Rich country can buy more vaccines, and the divide between rich and poor is growing during a pandemic. So if you consider that climate change and environmental challenges, all this is growing. So I'm just wondering, will we have the force to completely change the perspective and way of thinking and really care about others, or will we close in ourselves? And that's still a very, very big challenge. So when I say it's so important to have global networks and global initiatives, because I see that as a very crucial instrument to generate this kind of thinking and new culture. I'm not alone. It's not about Venice, Italy, Europe alone. It's about the planet. And if we are full of water here. I'm living in Venice, so water is not a problem. Oh, too much water is a problem here. But that's not a reason why I should not care about not spreading water and not wasting water. And if I can do something then with a sense of solidarity and care for others, that's so important. And I see that as the main challenge, frankly speaking.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Philippe. I mean, I'm not going to summarize everything right now, but is there anyone else with a hand up, or can you speak out? Because I can't see all the hands. I think it's been almost 2 hours since we started, and I know it's a Sunday for many of you in other parts of the world. I think for us, the Sunday evening is ending. So I just wanted to thank everyone who joined us this evening, our 4 wonderful and very inspiring speakers, the entire Confluence team, the design team of Radhika Chopra and Pi Technologies, Ipshita for leading us through very, very quickly in a snapshot of what Confluence is. Confluence doesn't begin and end with this exhibition. It is really something that we want to, over the 1 year, take to schools and academic institutions. And we're already trying to see how we can build similar partnerships across other urban waterscapes in India. So Sukrit has started work in Calcutta on visual and documenting the ghats along the Hooghly River and creating virtual walks. And that's also a partnership effort. I've moved to Pune. We're hoping we can start similar stories around water and water histories and all in Pune, where there are some amazing people working on water over here. So if we can, I mean, this is a very, it's not a very expensive initiative to do it this way. It's not like huge amounts of funding are needed for this, because, and I think it's the partnership really built on one thing and one thing alone, trust and passion and commitment to water. And I think respecting everyone, that was really the main thing. So thank you so much again for joining. Some of you have left us messages in the chat. Please do follow up with us. Please see how we can spread Confluence and how you, your organization, your academic institution, how we can use Confluence to bridge this understanding of water that we need to do around the world. I think that's important for us. And once I get a chance to take a deep breath, I will respond to many messages here and many new ideas, not only from this exhibition, but from things like the book, Phillipe, that I want to follow up on as well. So great, thank you. This closes the evening.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Eddy and Phillipe and Nupur.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye. The link of the website has been shared by Ipshita on the chat box.
Yeah.
If you would want to visit the website once we switch off this meeting. So good night and good evening. Have a good Sunday to everyone. I shall now...
sorry, before you close, Sukrit,
yes.
You're going to save this chat and share it with us, right, with the team?
Okay.
Yeah, because there are people here who have put email IDs. I just need to quickly copy a few of them down, Sukrit, before you close. One moment. So, but people can leave. If you want to copy anything from the chat, I would suggest.
Yeah, I have saved the chat, so I shall send it to you.
Great.
Okay then.
Thank you.
Thank you all. See you soon.
Have a nice Sunday.
Bye.
See you in live soon.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Darab.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Living Waters Museum team.
And Mumbai Water Narratives team.
Yes, Mumbai Water Narratives.
Please, we'll talk, Madhu, about how we can share this with the Asiatic Society also.
Sure, definitely.